If we could take our seats, please, we'll get going. Could we please take our seats? Okay, if we could come to order, please. Are there any public speakers?
No public speakers today.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 15th?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Committee work plan. Are there any changes to our work plan?
There are no changes to the work plan today.
In that case, we'll go right into a quarterly PTC update, and we'll hear from Chris Calvagna and Glenn Hayden.
Good afternoon. So this is an update, a quarterly update on the Long Island Railroad Metro North PTC project. To update progress since our February meeting. In April of 2015, the DOT and the FRA approved MTA's $967 million RIF loan application. 150 brackets to support transponders have been installed on Metro North's New Haven line, and transponder installations are now commencing. We achieved substantial completion on preliminary design reviews and commenced formal design reviews. As reported in February CPOC, an independent lab was testing our PTC data radio. They have completed that testing. Some discrepancies were found. We're working with the OEM to make corrections. First article inspection, factory acceptance testing, and installation of wayside signal equipment at a location each for Long Island Railroad and Metro North has been completed and is currently under test. The user interface prototypes are installed in Jamaica and Grand Central Terminal, supporting temporary speed restriction applications, and those are being utilized by our respective user groups. Monthly meetings regarding interoperability are progressing, which includes Amtrak predominantly, and Metro North and Long Island Railroad, including our systems integrators and suppliers. The systems integrator completed radio frequency propagation analysis for our pilot sections. We have submitted applications for radio site construction for those pilot locations to the FCC, and we expect to get those permits within 30 to 40 days, as long as there's no objections. The MTA also petitioned the FCC for radio license modification to add spectrum in Metro North's 4 counties where we're deficient. We expect a response from the FCC in July. Next page. For the next 90 days, Metro North will continue to progress transponder bracket installations and transponder installations on the New Haven line to be completed in September and roll out to the Harlem and Hudson lines. The final layout or formal design reviews are scheduled to be completed in July of 2015. The final layout of the office system is commencing this month, with installations to begin in August. Our ground-based communications networks from the office to the wayside and wayside to wayside has begun. This is for connectivity via circuits and fiber optic communications to enable PTC communications. Also, within the next 90 days, PTC functionality will be tested on 2 segments each for Long Island Railroad and Metro North. For Long Island Railroad, it would be Port Washington to Harold, and on the Port Washington branch, and Babylon to Patchogue. For Metro North, from Bridgepoint to New Haven on the New Haven line, and Tarrytown to Croton Harmon on the Hudson line. The pilot testing, which is scheduled in September, requires the design of subsystems to be finalized in July. We do anticipate that the pilot testing will be extended 1 to 3 months because of some delays. However, hardware design has progressed and functionality has progressed ahead of software to allow hardware manufacturing and delivery for installation. Next page. The budget remains the same at $968 million. Regarding the schedule, while the systems integrator has indicated there are intermediate milestone delays by several months, Long Island Railroad and Metro North are confident that they will meet the improved December 2017 completion dates and the full implementation in December 2018. The railroads are working with the systems integrator to develop schedule risk mitigation plans, of which include phasing of the software in pilot so that we can achieve revenue service demonstration on those pilots the beginning of next year, or the second quarter next year. We are installing some PTC equipment prior to completion of the pilot because the hardware designs are near completed for most elements. Long Island Railroad, also in mitigation, will be splitting kits, meaning that we won't get a full onboard kit. We'll be getting undercarriage, rooftop, and other parts in separate kits so that we can install during our maintenance cycles. Same thing for the wayside. We'll be receiving some signal equipment separate from communication equipment for those that are designed and completed in hardware so we can roll out installations. The next page shows the original and then our improved schedules. While the December 2015 milestones will not be met, we are confident in the December 2017 and December 2018 rollouts because equipment was going to be delivered late this year, so it will feed over into the following year with the delays that we're having. Next page. These are just some PTC photos. Some are new, some the board has seen in the last presentation. To the upper left, you have an M3A Metro North aspect display unit. You've seen similars for the M7s. Upper right, you'll see a wayside interface unit which connects to the signaling system out in the bungalows. Those are in test at Great Neck and CP271, and they are in burn-in. To the bottom, you'll see an M7A undercar scanner antenna and terminal box, which actually reads the transponders. Last presentation, you've seen that for the M7s on Long Island. Next page. As previously shown, Engage on the top is the transponders themselves, which are read by the CTV antennas. And on the bottom, in the middle of the picture, you'll see a 220 megahertz antenna. And to the far end of the same picture, you'll see the antenna array of 900 megahertz GPS and Wi-Fi installations. And that's the update.
IEC report, please, and then we'll go to questions.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. On budget, the IEC finds no issues affecting the cost and schedule since last report. On schedule, there is no change in the overall project schedule since the last report. The IEC agrees that finalizing design is likely to finish in July, therefore allowing the start of pilot testing in September. The IEC concurs that the pilot test may extend up to 3 months due to delay in design. The IEC is in full agreement with the railroad's progress to date since the last report. IEC notes the railroads will need to start installation of the onboard equipment by September 2015 to meet the commitment for the 2015 unit installations. This is going to require timely delivery of kits from the supplier, up and running shop locations, staffed with the planned number of crews. The IEC expects to see these plans in the near future and will comment further on them. Metro North onboard kits scheduled for delivery in April 2015 have been delayed because of the design running behind. It is likely that not all the kits needed to be available to meet the 2015 installation projections. On interoperability, issues are numerous and complex. Significant design and policy work has been being done with Amtrak. Unlike Long Island Railroad, Metro North has multiple freight railroads operating as tenants. Freight interoperability on Metro North is dependent on these tenant railroads having access to equipment information to allow installation work. The design is delayed until it is complete. Metro North is unable to provide access information to these tenant railroads. That completes our report.
Thank you. Andrew?
On the issue of the transponders that you mentioned and that were pictured, will those operate if they're covered with snow and or mud?
Yes, and submerged in water.
So they will. Thank you.
The silent-handed arm signals we have, I love it. Question for you, sir. There's two phrases you use on page 10 that I don't know what those two phrases mean, or at least what's embedded in them. Can you clarify the difference between completion and full implementation, and what does it mean to be at those different stages? I'm referring to the second dash point. Improved December 2017 completion dates, and then the 1 year later full implementation dates. Just explain what happens at those two different marks.
With our improved schedules, we planned on 90% of the infrastructure being deployed by the end of December 2017. and we still anticipate that to occur, with full completion, meaning the remainder to be installed in 2018. So we just wanted to show that there's substantial completion in 2017.
Okay, Neil?
Still unclear, but let me try it one more time, which is then, the December 2017 date is not completion of the system, it's the completion of whatever was meant to be completed by the end of 17. then.
Correct.
So it's not the completion, it's just, it's a date that ends, and we've completed whatever we've completed, which is I guess in the revised date, all of Metro North and virtually all of Long Island Railroad, right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions? Discussion? In that case, we'll move to the quarterly report on capital construction and start with the number 7 line. Is it going to be Sean? Yes. Okay. Sean Kildare.
Good afternoon. I'd like to report on the progress for the 7-line extension and the new 34th Street station. Consistent with what was reported at the last CPOC meeting, all construction and system testing activities required to support revenue service have been progressing well and are expected to be completed by June 30, 2015. Revenue service is projected for the first half of the third quarter. There are 4 challenges remaining and are being monitored closely. I will discuss these challenges in detail later in the presentation. In regards to costs, currently the project is forecasted to be completed within budget. Next slide. This slide presents the plan versus actual cost performance. As you can see, the actual expenditures are trending favorably for both total project cost and third-party construction cost. The total project construction expenditures through April is $2.268 billion. The third-party construction cost expenditures through April, is this on? Can you hear me? Hello? Okay.
Get closer to the mic. Get a mic closer.
Okay. Is $1.917 billion. Next slide. This slide presents the cost and schedule contingency status. Currently, the project has $54.7 million in remaining contingency. The project forecasts a remaining contingency balance of $2 million at completion. Next slide. The next few slides deal with critical issues. The 3 issues on this slide show the critical concerns discussed at the last CPOC meeting. Mitigations have been identified, implemented, and performed in a timely manner. These issues are currently no longer a concern. Next slide. The first critical issue is the completion of critical code observation log items. New York City Transit operators, maintainers, and code compliance crews have performed inspections and attended field visits. As a result of these efforts, an observation log which lists finding and punch list items have been developed. The project team and the Office of Code Compliance has identified within this log specific items needed to be completed to initiate revenue service. One example of this is a code requirement for all stair treads to be level and the distance between treads is within allowances. Currently, final field adjustments to steel stair treads and rises are ongoing. The contractor is working to complete all these items. Next item. The second critical item is a slow progress by the contractor in performing the testing of the elevator from street level to the upper mezzanine. The street level elevator, as well as all elevators, are required for ADA accessibility and need to be completed before revenue service. Currently, the street elevator is the last elevator scheduled to be tested, and therefore this activity is on a critical path. The contractor is currently addressing the punch list items prior to scheduling a combined New York City witness test, as well as integrated level 5 testing. Testing is currently forecasted from June 24th through June 29th, and we're monitoring this closely. Next slide. The third critical issue deals with the testing of tunnel ventilation fans. Final 100-hour endurance testing was conducted for tunnel ventilation fans at Site L and K. The fans successfully passed the test. Site J, tunnel ventilation fans endurance test, is scheduled to start this week and be completed before June 30th. We will monitor this closely also. Next slide, please. The final critical issue is related to the Station Service Center, also used to be called a token booth. The completion of the architectural items at the Station Service Center have been delayed. Installation of architectural elements didn't meet the contractual specifications. Delaying completion of the Station Service Center could impact revenue service. The contractor has proposed solutions to meet the installation requirements. The solutions must be agreed to by New York City Transit Station Department, and the contractor must provide certification compliance prior to revenue service. This plan is in place and expected to be mitigated by June 30th.
Thank you, Sean. May I have the IEC report, Ms. Rivera?
Good afternoon, members of the board. The IEC review consists of the budget and schedule. I will begin with the budget. I'm sorry. The overall budget remains at $2.42 billion. Based on the project information, the IEC currently forecasts an estimate of completion of $2.4 billion. The contingency of project completion is forecast to be $2 million by MTACC, which remains the same as last reported. Additional monies may need to be allocated for TA labor, which includes GOs, flagging, and other items, and an extension of time. The IEC forecasts that all remaining contingencies will be exhausted by the completion of the project in 2017. Schedule review. The IEC is concerned that integrated test contingency for critical systems required for revenue service has been reduced due to rework and retest requirements. The vertical hydraulic street elevator, as Sean mentioned, required for ADA compliance, is now on the critical path for revenue service. After integrated testing, endurance tests for escalators, elevators, and tunnel ventilation fans need to be completed. This will be done prior to revenue service. New York City Transit and System Safety confirmed that the 30-day operational test for fire alarm will begin prior to revenue service as well. As last reported by MTACC, 63% of code items and 50% of non-code critical items required for revenue service have been verified as complete. While progress is being made to address these items, the IEC notes items can continue to be added as NYCT acceptance testing, integrated testing, and inspections are ongoing. System safety and security certification is ongoing as well. However, the IEC has observed changes to the certification plan, which were reviewed with the Public Transportation Safety Board. Tracking of the certification process with respect to testing will complete after integrated testing. Based on the work that remains to be completed, it is the IEC's opinion that revenue service will begin no earlier than August 2015.
Comments or questions? In that case, we'll move on to the...
Are we still saying it's June and they're saying it's August? Or what are we? Is that right?
It's a good
We're
question.
not saying June anymore.
I'm sorry, let me answer it. The construction will be completed by the end of this month. The testing, there are some commissioning issues that may not be solved, and what we have done is we allowed additional time in the event that all of these things are necessary. So this is why we have not established yet a revenue service date.
Additional questions? In that case, we'll move on to the Second Avenue Subway.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon. The Second Avenue Subway project is on schedule to meet the December 2016 revenue service date. The project is on budget. The construction work is progressing at all 4 stations and tunnels in between the stations. Progress since last reported is as follows. Received delivery of all 22,000 linear feet of track and installed 8,780 linear feet of rail. we are scheduled to complete the 72nd Street Station Entrance 1 rock excavation by June 30th, 2015. 90-day look ahead to complete the track work at 96th Street Station and to complete the facility power installation work at 96th Street Station and commence the Con Edison inspection and testing. Next slide, please. Actual dollar spent is less than the 2009 planned expenditure. This is due to the favorable construction bids received for the construction contracts. The estimated completion cost is $4.366 billion. The third-party construction dollar spent is also less than 2009 planned expenditure for the same reason. Next slide, please. Under schedule, the project had 186 calendar days of contingency in 2009. The current schedule contingency this quarter increased to 43 calendar days from 38 calendar days in the last report. Budget. The project had $322 million contingency in 2009 budget. The current project contingency is $175 million, which is $15 million less than the last report. This reduction in contingency is due to the approved and pending negotiated additional work orders in the construction contracts. Next slide, please. The critical issues. The issue is the facility power energization at all three stations may not be available in time to support planned testing and commissioning activities. The impact is delay to the availability of permanent power will have a direct impact to project contingency. The project has implemented a mitigation plan to obtain the permanent power by end of this year. Project implemented an acceleration plan for 86th Station and 96th Station, and we are working with the Con Edison to assure that the feeders are ready to be energized to support the December 2015 completion date for the facility power. Next slide, please. The issue is the completion of the 86th Station is behind schedule. The impact is delay to the 86th Station completion may impact the revenue service date. The mitigation. The project is monitoring the progress against the plan schedule activities to achieve the August 2016 completion. The contractor and the electrical subcontractor is working overtime during the weekdays and on weekends to maintain the completion date of August 2016. Next slide, please. The issue is completion of the entrance 1 work located at 69th Street by September 2016 to maintain the project revenue service date. The impact is delay to the substantial completion of the 72nd Street Station and potential impact to the September 2016 completion may impact the revenue service date. Mitigation. The project is working with the contractor to maintain the schedule by monitoring the progress of the critical work such as rock excavation, concrete lining, and the street excavation work. The contractor is scheduled to complete the rock excavation by end of June 2015, and contractor has commenced the concreting the lower portion of the escalator incline ahead of the planned schedule. Next slide, please. Track installation is delayed due to the slow progress in submissions and installation work. The impact is the delay could potentially impact the program contingency. Mitigation. The project has worked with the contractor and developed a revised installation sequence that supports the March 2016 completion of the track work. Next slide, please. That concludes my report, sorry.
Thank you. May I have the IEC report, please, Mr. Haggis?
In our review of the 5 active contracts on this project, the 86th Street Station is our focus of the schedule review. While it's our opinion that the project's contingency is essentially exhausted because of the delays at this station, we note that the Finnish contractor has recently ramped up his efforts, and with a continued improvement in production at 86th Street,
could recover most, if not all, of that contingency. In turning to other issues, again, at 86th Street, we have two other specific issues that we're tracking closely. The provision of permanent power, which is a goal for the entire project. By the end of this year, we find that 86th Street seems to be lagging in the installation of equipment. It's something that needs to be addressed and accelerated if needed. Second, the timely turnover of systems equipment rooms at 86th Street is behind schedule, although it's expected now to happen by the end of this month substantially. That needs to happen more or less within the next couple of weeks for the project to maintain a comfortable schedule for the systems installation. We want to point out that the project has dealt with two issues we brought up in our March report. The track work recovery seems to be going well. We have a new recovery plan developed with the contractor, and they seem to be well on their way to making their first milestone with the new schedule. And secondly, as the project reports, they've stabilized the delays at the entrance 1 site at 72nd Street, and we feel that that is now not as critical as before, certainly something still to watch. Turning to budget, the project is on budget. Its cost contingency is $175 million. We point out that remains above the FTA minimum of $140 for the current level of project completion. The cost contingency did go down significantly, about $15 million since our last report, primarily due to a projected increase in the cost of the improvements to the 63rd Street station. Globally, the IEC believes that project expenditures are going to have to ramp up to an average of $45 million a month for the remaining 18 months or so projected in the project, from the current rolling average of the last few months of about $35 million. And we'll be watching those numbers for our next report. Finally, I want to end with a comment that the IEC undertook an independent program-wide risk assessment for the project. We completed our workshops with the project support in May as planned. This assessment is going to enable us to identify the cost and schedule risk particular to the remaining work and help us construct additional recommendations to focus the project on improving confidence in their December revenue service date.
Thank you. Yes.
It's clear from the report, well, I shouldn't say that. It may be clear from the report, let me put it that way, that there are a number of issues relating to the entrances and exits in the project. While some of them relate to the track, a lot of them have to do with the stations themselves. Assuming for the moment that not all of the stations can be completed by December 2016, that's what I meant, what is the possibility of opening revenue service with limited station availability?
The negative.
Because?
Because I believe that one of the requirements is to have, in these particular stations, at least two means of egress, egress primarily.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, let's assume for the moment you start it where it starts, and you end it where it ends, and you just don't stop in the middle. Or you don't stop at 86th Street if 86th Street is not finished until 86th Street is finished.
That would require a discussion with New York City Transit, frankly. And
Okay,
I'm not
well.
prepared to, I'm building it, I'm not making the.
I'm not
operational.
arguing, I'm not having this
and my-
conversation.
also
We
have
are
to have-
assuming at this point that we need to have them all.
Right.
Yeah, we would also have to have the permission from the FTA to do that also.
Right.
If they contribute.
Okay, but the credibility of this organization is dependent upon the December 2016 date, as they are on all of the other dates. And so it would be, assuming for the moment, that there are some stations which are completed, because if none of them are completed, this is a fruitless conversation. But if some of them are completed and some of them are not, the possibility of just going past that station which is not completed, I think when we get closer to that date, and luckily we're having this conversation in June of 2015 and not June of 2016, should be analyzed. Thank you.
Noted.
Michael, how far north of the 96th Street station have the tracks been laid?
To 105th Street, and that's the tunnel that we have. And then we have a tunnel from 110 to 120 that nothing has been done.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? In that case, we'll move on to East Side Access. Mr. Goodrich?
On a report on East Side Access this afternoon, East Side Access remains on schedule for its December 2022 revenue service date. Also, we're still within the $10.178 billion budget, excluding the rolling stock reserve. As far as progress, our Manhattan South structures, placement of concrete in the lower level interior walls of the East Cavern, we had indicated here is going to be completed in June. That's actually is going to slip into July at this point. So that's the latest update on that. On the Manhattan North Structures contract, we've completed the invert in the West Tunnel, and we've switched access to the West Tunnel. We've begun concrete placement in the East Structures and in the East Tunnel. Out in Herald, we've energized the C3 feeder in April as part of the 12 kV system. That's part of the CH53 contract. On our systems contract, we've accepted the baseline schedule. That was an issue we talked about in our last report. We have now accepted that baseline schedule with the exception of the integrated systems testing portion of their schedule. As far as the 90-day look ahead, we expect that all physical work on the 55th Street vent plant facility, except for Con Edison cable supports inside the facility, will be completed 2 months later than last report. That'll be in August. And we also expect to achieve substantial completion on the early fit-out work in the GCT concourse, as well as both the CH53 and CH54A contracts in Herald. We expect to achieve substantial completion. Next slide. As far as cost and schedule performance, overall, we've expended $5.59 billion, which is out of the 10.178, which is 99% of plan. And for third-party construction, the actual is 3.4 out of 6.45, and that's represents 97.8% of plan. As far as cost and schedule contingency, there's no change in the program schedule contingency, which remains at 22 months. And the current budget contingency is $706 million, which is $3 million less than the last report. The net decrease is due to both a drawdown needed to award the CM14B contract and the increased budget need for force account. This is a new critical milestone issue that we're presenting for the first time. This is on our Manhattan North Structures contract. It's milestone number 2 within the contract, which is completion of the lower tunnels. It's due in February of 2016. It is behind schedule and not meeting its recovery schedule. The reason it's a critical milestone
needs to be completed in order to provide site access for the CM007 contract, which is our final contract in Manhattan. CM007 is on the project's critical path, and it's currently forecasted to be achieved about a month late in March 17th. The project is meeting weekly with the contractor to review their progress against the recovery schedule and investigating alternative work methods with the contractor to increase their productivity, such as robotic shotcrete application. The next critical issue was the acceptance of the baseline schedule for the systems contract. That was resolved in March with the acceptance of the schedule. It's been accepted with comments, with the exception of integrated systems testing. We do expect further changes to the schedule as the contractor's designs are completed for various systems. The CM007 terminal cavern and track contracts is in procurement. It's a critical path procurement and award. Our plan is to award this contract by November of this year in order to provide additional time for procurement and delivery of precast concrete elements. Award of the contract must not be later than January 2016 in order not to impact the critical path of the program. The award is contingent upon funding to be approved as part of the 2015 to 19 capital plan, currently pending in Albany. Next item is cutover of H3 Signal Hut in Herald Interlocking, scheduled for November 2015. Remains a top priority in Herald. We are closely monitoring the cutover predecessor activities and identifying workarounds where warranted. This is the westbound bypass contract, also in Herald. And the critical issue is the Amtrak support for this contract. Substantial completion of this contract is delayed 9 months currently, with additional future delays possible. The contractor is working multiple shifts to expedite the work when it benefits the schedule, and the Eastside Access is working with the railroads to obtain 15 to 30-day track outages for work on the contract's critical path.
Can I ask a question about the track outages that you just mentioned?
Sure.
When you say that Amtrak has not agreed to the level of closures there, what would those closures mean to the Northeast Corridor schedule that you're asking for, just out of curiosity?
Well, generally what we've done in the past is we've worked with both Amtrak and Long Island Railroad, and we usually can come up with an outage plan with diversions that end up not impacting their service plan.
Like middle of the night or something? Well, there is a middle of the night train.
Well, these would be longer term outages. Typically, they'd be longer than the 53-hour outage on the weekend. But with the switches that are in place and routes around that work area, we have been able to work out some outage plans. So and that's very productive for us. So we're looking to do more of that in the future.
Before we go on to the IEC, since we've broken in, I want to be sure that the board heard something that Bill said. He said very clearly that we can't be awarding CM007 without a capital plan. And if you look at the schedule, he had hoped to award that in November. So we've had discussions amongst ourselves about how long we can hang on without a capital plan approved. I think this is your first glimpse of how long we can hang on. That said, if I could have the IEC report, Mr. Egger.
Good afternoon. Budget and schedule. The budget is 10.178 billion with a remaining contingency of 706 million, which is 3 million less than compared with March 2015. And there is additional pressure on the budget, which could reduce the contingency further. The revenue service date remains in December 2022 with a 22 months contingency that has not changed since it was established in 2014. And the Amtrak work required for revenue service, or the Herald work required for revenue service, remains off the project critical path by 6 months. The IC has the following concerns with the current Systems Package 1 schedule. MTACC and the contractor need to correct the logic and activity durations for local testing in the contractor's baseline schedule, and delayed development of an integrated systems testing schedule increases schedule risk, since the time for recovery of potential delays is significantly reduced and will add to the delays already identified in the baseline schedule updates. Concerns in Herald. Delays to third-party construction create schedule pressure to the completion of the Herald work required for revenue service. If not addressed, these delays will create a construction sequence in Herald that cannot be supported by the railroad operations. And additional pressure to the completion of Herald work required for revenue service is also coming from delays to the signal hut cutover plan. The IC has one recommendation regarding the Systems Package 1 contract. The IC recommends that the contractor provide a framework that shows proper logic and high-level durations until a detailed integrated systems testing schedule in March 2016 is available. This concludes our report.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Mitch.
On this project and on a number of the other projects, last month the Federal Transit Administration issued a report which seemed to contradict a number of our assumptions on dates. Has the IEC looked at that report and provided any analysis of whether their dates are better than our dates?
Our reports basically start out that we have 22 months of contingency left. When we talk here about delays, we generally, these are delays to completion dates of contracts. Since the 22 months are still intact on Eastern Access, we do not see any reason to correct our current revenue service date of December 2022.
Notwithstanding the fact that they do.
I think
I'm not arguing right or wrong.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to figure out why there seems to be a significant difference between the two. Now, obviously, we're making assumptions about assumptions. We're making assumptions about things that have not yet happened. And so the question is, the basis for those assumptions on our analysis and your analysis, which correspond, and their analysis are different. The question is, are there material reasons why they are different?
Our assumptions were different when we had the replan in 2014. The FDA at this point had an end date that was further out. I would have to go back and re-inform myself on what exactly the differences were, but obviously these differences have not changed.
Right.
Because they have not come around to our date.
Because they're still assuming a date different than everybody else is assuming.
Right, but I also know that when they established their date, I think they went to a 90% probability in their assumptions, while we were more around 80% of probability from a risk perspective.
Now, we could just blame it on Amtrak, which clearly it's interesting that one federal agency says you're going to get delayed, and two of the reasons for that delay is another federal agency. I find that very interesting in that context, but I'll leave that to them to figure out.
On the Second Avenue, because that was actually reported in the newspapers.
Right.
The feds have established way back when we signed the full funding grant agreement, a February 2018, if I'm correct. And that was based, and I think that Kurt is correct, on a different probabilistic model in which they assume the 90% probability that we're going to complete. We're working on an 80%. Yet, at the same time that they have actually said that, they believe that it will be a credible thing to say that we'll finish early on 2017, and with a little push, it will be December 2016. And I did not put words in their mouth. That was actually reported by them. So they are taking additional precautionary things. They have a different way of doing risk analysis than we do. They do it quite different. As a result, we get different answers.
Just like to add one thing to one of the points that Michael made was important, because the federal government, when they do their risk analysis, they do a top-down risk analysis. Our risk analysis are bottom-up. And so the risk analysis that's done from the top down is generally more broad. They're going to take a lot more unknown unknowns in. And so I think on this one and the other one, Second Avenue and East Side Access, they're both consistently a year greater than we are.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, then we'll move on to the Cortlandt Street number 1 line station reconstruction. Uday?
Yeah. Good afternoon. As you want to recall, that this station was supposed to be constructed by the Port Authority, is going to be constructed by the MTA now. Just to bring everybody on the same page as to where the station is, because this station has been closed for quite some time. It is stuck between the Path Hall on the east side and the Transit Hub on the west. So it's stuck in between two stations. Just want to give an orientation of where the station is. Next slide, please. In terms of the schedule, it's a 40-month schedule from award, pending risk assessment. On the cost, we had $158.4 million pending risk assessment. The progress so far is we awarded the construction contract on April 22nd of 2015. We have the assignment between the Port Authority and us in terms of the design, and the risk assessment workshops were held on June 18th and 19th. The 90-day look ahead is we already started mobilizing on the project. We had the first geo this past weekend where we did the survey, and we started to schedule the track next month. We already issued the NTP to DDP last week. In terms of the critical milestones that we're tracking as we go forward on the project, the first one we're tracking is the completion of the design of the Northern Street entrance. Design and negotiation of the Northern must be completed in a timely manner to allow for construction, NTP issued by the fourth quarter of 2015. The impact is delaying in issuing the NTP by the end of this year will potentially delay installation of the elevator and conduit on the project. The mitigation is to initiate the design, which have already done, and we want to get this done in a timely manner. The second critical issue that we're tracking is completing all the track work. We need to complete the track by June 2016 on both north and southbound of the platform. The impact is delaying in completing track work will impact the completion of the project due to unevaluative general orders after June 2016. And this is due to the reconstruction of the Clark Street tube. The mitigation is to ensure that we closely monitor contractors' work schedule and work plans, closely monitor all the activities on the geos, and to make sure all submittals and middle inspections are done in timely fashion. Next, please. Third and most important critical issue that we're tracking on the job is demolition of the existing path station. We call it the Northern Temporary Access by the Port Authority. Port Authority is supposed to demolish the northern path temporary access so that we can construct our northern entrance, the elevator and the stair at the northern end of the station. Delaying in demolition by the Port Authority could delay construction of the northern entrance, which in turn may delay opening of the station. Mitigation is if the demolition of the northern temporary access by the port does not start by September 2015, then the issue needs to be elevated to the high management of the Port Authority. That completes my report.
Any questions about this? This is a near and dear station to my heart because coming across the river on Path, it's the obvious place where I would get on a train to come here. Oh, thank you. In that case. Oh, even a better reason, right? Could we have the IEC report? Mr. Askew, please.
Thank you. As far as the budget, the estimated project budget is $158.4 million. The final estimated project budget will likely be adjusted based on the results of the comprehensive project risk assessment that was conducted last week. As far as schedule, the IEC concurs with the MTACC on the following critical milestones: finalizing the design of the north entrance and issuing a notice to proceed to the contractor by the end of 2015. Also, complete all track work by June 2016 within the current schedule of the GOs for the project. IEC's concerns and issues. First off, contingency and budget. The current budget contingency of $16.5 billion for the project contains a substantial amount of unnegotiated, committed change orders, such as the addition of the north entrance and the updated communication systems. This may reduce the available contingency to an unacceptable amount for the current project budget. Contingency and budget concerns will be revisited based on the conclusions of the forthcoming risk assessment report. Concerns as far as logistics. The logistical challenges and complexities of the site could pose additional costs and schedule risks to the budget and the completion date. A key concern is, the Port Authority must demolish the north temporary access to the PAF station before Cortlandt Station north entrance can be constructed. IEC has a recommendation. That recommendation is, the IEC recommends that the cost and schedule recovery plan be developed in the event of delays associated with the demolition of the PAF station, and also in lieu of the issues related to the logistical challenges for the site. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions? I have a brief one. I'm assuming that when we developed our schedule, we did so knowing what the Port Authority's schedule was going to be. And do we hear from them on a regular basis as to whether they're on schedule or not?
We meet with the Port Authority almost bi-weekly on this job right now. Knowing the Port Authority, there's always going to be other constraints, other stakeholders that drive the schedule more than my project. So we do meet with them. They have committed to complete this demolition in a timely fashion.
I do hope that the past are not going to revisit us, because in the past says that they were basically extremely late by not even starting the work.
Well, please keep us posted on it. I think that's the best we can do. Moving on. Craig, would you like to report on the capital program status, please?
Okay. A report can be found on commitments and completions on page 71 of the agenda. I will provide a summary of highlights through May. Commitments. Agencies plan to commit a total of $3.1 billion in 2015, including 34 major commitments. To date, the MTA planned 17 major commitments. 15 were committed, 2 were delayed. Agencies committed a total of $1.5 billion through May versus a $1.7 billion year-to-date goal. The variance is mostly due to a delay in award of communications-based signal contract for the Queens Boulevard Phase 1 contract by New York City Transit. By year's end, the MTA forecasts exceeding its $3.1 billion commitment. Moving on to completions. The agencies plan a total of $2.6 billion in project completions in 2015, including 25 major completions. To date, the MTA planned 8 major completions. 5 have been completed, 3 others are delayed. The MTA completed $756 million versus a $1.1 billion year-to-date goal. The shortfall is due to delays that are forecast to be made up as the year progresses. By year's end, the MTA forecasts meeting its $2.6 billion completion goal. I refer committee members to page 80 for the traffic light report and to page 121 for the change order report. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to entertain.
Any questions? Any additional business to come before the committee? In that case, is there a motion to adjourn? We're adjourned.